One of the focus of this channel is to encourage people to think about retiring as soon as they can, to take full advantage of what I call the youth of their senior years. But every now and then I'll get a comment underneath my videos where people will say, I went to my financial advisor and he or she said, I can't retire. I need to work another 5, 7, or 10 years, even though maybe this person has $1 million or $2 million and they're in the top 10% of all Americans. So how does this happen? I want to let you inside of the tent so that you have the information to make the right decision for you. So first off, I'm not critiquing any financial advisors. I'm sure that the technique is right, the math is right, the thinking is right. But oftentimes where financial advisors miss and don't fully help their clients is by not explaining to the clients. Sometimes folks will come in and say, this is what retirement looks like for me. And yes, under that scenario, maybe you can't retire. But I encourage my friends that are advisors, my colleagues, let's push a little bit. Let's explore. Let's walk alongside our clients and say, you know, what are the trade-offs? And are the trade-offs worthwhile? Let's say you're 55 and you'd like to be able to retire early. You'd like to be able to retire in the next 5 years. And you come in and you talk to me. One of my first questions to you is going to be, what does retirement look like to you? And to put together what dollar-wise what that looks like so that we know how much money that you need. Now, if I left it there, if I just said, what does retirement look like? And you tell me that, and I don't explain to you what the trade-offs are, yeah, that might, you know, there might be a good, better, and best in your retirement planning, and you might be willing to make some trade-offs. You might be willing to have a lower level of certainty. You might be willing to cut back on expenses. You might be willing to be flexible and maybe, you know, worst case, maybe work a part-time job for a couple years. So let's dig into that. Let me let you inside of the tent of how financial advisors work, not as an expose, not trying to say, oh, this person is wrong, but just so that you can work more effectively with your financial advisor. So like I said, the discussion begins, can you retire? It doesn't begin with how much money you have. It begins on what does retirement look like? And then financial advisors are trying to put a dollar amount on that. So what does that look like? So let's say we come up with a game plan and we need so many dollars a year. Now, then we run what's called the Monte Carlo simulation, trying to give our clients an idea of how likely it is that they will never run out of money. And obviously, all financial advisors want our clients to have as high of a likelihood as possible of never running out of money. And so the gold standard for that is about 97% likelihood of never running out of money. Now, there's all kinds of assumptions that go into this, right? I mean, think about it. We don't, as I record this, the current tax rates are set to expire at the end of 2025. The Tax Cut and Jobs Act, I believe I've got that right, has a sunset provision, and tax rates go up in, as I record this, 18 months. We don't even know if that's going to happen. Maybe they get extended, maybe they don't. We certainly don't know how long our clients are going to live. We don't know what your health is going to be like and what that's going to cost, whether you're going to need long-term care or not. So there's all kinds of unknowns. But yet, we like to put a certainty of, okay, based on what you've told us, based on this model, you've got a 97% likelihood of never running out of money. And you want to have a high likelihood of not running out of money. But what's that trade-off? Is the trade-off, you know, maybe at an 80% likelihood of not running out of money, you could retire 5, 6, 7 years earlier. For a lot of folks, they'd say, you know what? I'll take an 80% likelihood of never running out of money, coupled with 100% likelihood of being able to enjoy more fully these next 5 years and retire early and do the things I've been putting off, right? So that's a trade-off that only the client can make, but oftentimes financial advisors will report it as almost like a certainty. You need to have 97% likelihood. And again, even with that 97% likelihood, it's based on a lot of assumptions that we don't know. So number one is that 97% likelihood, I think, locks people in and prevents them from retiring sooner. The other is the trade-off on the expenses that you share. I think good financial advisors take the information you give them, and then they do their financial planning. I think great financial advisors walk alongside you on this journey and help you, and if you're married, you and your spouse make the trade-offs and understand, if you want, maybe there's a good, better, and best to retirement, and you'd be happy to have good as opposed to better or best in order to get 5 or 7 more years of the youth of your senior years. So that's another trade-off, is what does retirement look like? What are the expenses associated with that? And how important are some of the things that you're saying that are causing some of these expenses? Maybe it's buying a new car every 3, 4, 5 years. If a financial advisor said, you could retire right now if instead of buying a brand new $75,000 car every 4 or 5 years, if instead of that you bought a used car at $25,000 a year. For some people, they'd say, no, thank you. I want that new car every 3, 4, 5 years. But for other people, they'd say, that's a trade-off that I'm willing to make. And so understanding which of the expenses are really must-have, which of your expenses are nice to have, and then which of the expenses you'd be willing to let go of in order to take full advantage of the youth of your senior years and to have a few more years, which likely are going to be your healthiest and most active years. I've shared it before. If you're 60 years old, unfortunately, most of us have fewer than 1,000 weeks of healthy, active time in front of us. And frankly, those early weeks, the first 100 weeks, are likely going to be our healthiest and most active. So are we willing to trade off some things in order to capture a couple more years of that? Some of us are, some of us aren't. So it's looking at the expenses, it's looking at the trade-off, and then it's also looking at your flexibility. Let's say you say, okay, we're willing to accept an 80% likelihood of success, of never running out of money, which means there's a 20% chance you're going to have to do some things. Now, we don't fly the plane into the ground. I encourage you to work with a financial advisor and to check in every couple of years, just like you would with a physician, and say, how are we doing? Here's what our experiences are. We're not spending as much money, or maybe we're spending a little bit more money. And just like when you visit the doctor and he or she measures your blood pressure, if your blood pressure changes, you probably want to revisit with your doctor. I can tell you your monthly expenses. The difference between, unfortunately, your plan can be very sensitive. The difference between spending $5,000 a month in retirement and $6,000 can make a difference. And it can be one of these things that you want to adjust and tweak, make small tweaks along the way. And sometimes even the difference of $5,000 and $5,500 can make the difference. But being flexible. Would you be willing to work a part-time job, work 10 or 15 hours a week for a couple years? Let's say the stock market's down, and rather than be a forced seller in a down market and have to sell stocks that are down, would you be willing to minimize how many of your stocks you have to sell in order to fund your living expenses? Would you be willing to work 15 or 20 hours? If you don't have health care insurance, would you be willing to take a job that maybe gives you health care insurance by working part-time? These are the types of trade-offs. There's no right or wrong answer. There's no one answer that fits everybody. But this is the difference between good and great financial advisors. This is the difference between when a client comes in and says, I've got $2 million. And yes, technically, based on what that person told you, no, they can't retire for another 5 or 7 years. But can you work with your financial advisor and say, what type of plan could I have now where I could enjoy the youth of my senior years, where I could retire now? So those are the three main things. Is it's based on your expenses. It's based on your percent certainty. How much certainty do you need? Are you willing to be flexible? Earlier I talked about we don't fly the plane into the ground. We make some course adjustments along the way so that we still have a smooth approach into retirement. And what are those trade-offs, and are you willing to do it? And it's similar to enjoying the journey along the way to retirement. We want to enjoy the journey, not just the destination. And I think of retirement as the starting line, not the finish line. It's the starting line of an exciting chapter for our lives. And we want to get there, but we also want to enjoy the journey until we get there, which is why I made this video here. 7 things to think about, stop doing in your 50s and 60s to enjoy your journey more. Thanks for watching this video, and I'll see you in that one. Bye-bye.